Well, joining me right now is Hugh Hewitt, the host of the Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network, author and MSNBC political analyst Ron Reagan, and New York Times reporter Michelle Sinner. Thank you all for joining us. Well, these two competing messages, what I saw is, and I agree with Trump on this point, I thought his speech the night he won brought the markets under control, which were 800 bad to positive about 300 or 400. So it stabilized the international markets, which was a responsible thing to do. I thought his meeting with the president was fine and even respectful, talking about the president's accomplishments in a positive way. Never heard that before. And then I thought the tweeting was crazy. And I wonder what's running the mind of Donald Trump. Mr. Hewitt, we've been through a lot of this together now. We are war veterans. We've been in the bunker. But let's see if we can figure out, is Donald Trump a little loony? Is Donald Trump got a Mr. Hyde and a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing going on where he uses Mr. Hyde when he wants to, which one's the good guy? I forgot it. The bad guy. He uses both the good guy and the bad guy. Usually the bad guy. Which one is he?
Well, I think he's the good guy. We've had the best 72 hours.
Jekyll's the good guy, but Hyde's the bad guy.
Yeah, the good guy is Hyde. We've had the best 72 hours that the Republicans and conservatives had since the financial panic in the fall of 2008. And the putting of Vice President-elect Pence in charge of the transition, more good news. The meetings yesterday with Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, great news. The fact that the Supreme Court is saved, terrific news. And I think Donald Trump is going to find being president as much fun as did Ron's father, and as hopefully as gracious as he was in the Oval Office and as winsome towards his critics as his father was. I haven't been feeling this good in years, Chris, because I think the opportunity to undo some of the damage of the last 8 years legislatively is in front of us, to rebuild the military, which is an urgent need, and Donald Trump has promised, and to put originalists on the court. There's not just one Supreme Court vacancy. There are 99 other federal judges, and Harry Reid broke the filibuster, so it's all majority rule.
Okay, except for the filibuster rule still applies to Supreme Court justices. So the Democrats can still filibuster at the Supreme Court level. Well, you can say that if you want to, but it's not true.
That's not true, given the way that Reid broke it.
Okay, well, that's an argument, not a fact. Let me go to Ron Reagan here. Ron, what's your reaction to the two Trumps, or do you just see one? Tell me how you look at it. Take some time.
Well, this is the two tweets that you mentioned, the first of which was almost certainly written by Donald Trump, the second of which may or may not have been, are exemplary of the drama that is about to play out, both in public, because, of course, Donald Trump is the president of the United States, but also, just as importantly, within Donald Trump himself. The question we're going to have answered here shortly is whether Donald Trump will remain the sort of puerile figure that he was during the campaign, thin-skinned, unable to contain himself, incoherent frequently, or whether Donald Trump can become the kind of man he needs to be the president of the United States. Now, Hugh used to work for my father in his administration, and he's aware of my father. He's familiar with my father. He doesn't know him as well as I do, of course. But since he brought my father up, I have to say, as a point of personal privilege, perhaps, that I find myself in a state of cognitive dissonance here when I watched Donald Trump about to take the Oval Office. I remember sitting in the Oval Office with my father, and though we disagreed about politics frequently, I was always impressed by his enormous dignity. Yeah. Yes, he had fun sometimes in being president of the United States, but he saw it as a gigantic responsibility, one that required preparation, deep thought, long thought about issues. And Hugh will back me up that Ronald Reagan, despite his critics saying that he was shallow and all of that, had all of those other qualities. He thought long and hard about issues here. So now I think about Donald Trump sitting in that chair, and I think about the dignity that my father had. And the only way I can think of to explain this to you in this cognitive dissonance that I feel right now is asking you, all of you, if you can imagine in your wildest dreams ever hearing an audio tape of my father bragging about his fame and how it allows him to molest women at will. I think we all know the answer to that. The presidency demands enormous dignity, and we are shortly going to find out whether it has the power to compel dignity.
Do you want to respond to that, Hugh?
Yeah, I think Ron is very right. His father was one of the most thoughtful and underrated thinkers of our past century. And I hope, for example, Donald Trump studies his presidency and says, how did Ronald Reagan start? He started with Jim Baker, Ed Meese, and Mike Deaver. So rather than trying to arrange the White House into one person, if you put Reince Priebus as chief of staff and Steve Bannon as counselor and Kellyanne Conway, you'll get at least a shadow of what Ronald Reagan did. A lot of inputs so that he could retreat to the Oval Office and think everything that Ron said, and obviously he knows his father better than anyone else in Washington, D.C., is absolutely true.
Yeah, I think from the outside, I knew that about your father, about President Reagan. He would, well, he had tremendous, we have to do this another night. He had tremendous understanding of the Constitution. He understood the role of the opposition. He understood the role of the other people elected by the people. And he put it all together. That was his salute to the Constitution, recognizing how it all worked together. Anyway, one of the most consistent themes of Donald Trump's campaign was to call to repeal and replace Obamacare. Let's watch this one.
My poll numbers are going through the roof. You know why? I really believe a big part of it is Obamacare, because we're going to repeal it and replace it.
Obamacare has to be replaced, and we will do it, and we will do it very, very quickly. It is a catastrophe. If we don't repeal and replace Obamacare, we will destroy American health care forever.
But now President-elect Trump seems to be softening that hard line somewhat. Here's what he told 60 Minutes today for a broadcast on Sunday night. Let's watch.
When you replace it, are you going to make sure that people with preconditions are still covered?
Yes, because it happens to be one of the strongest assets.
You're going to keep that?
Also, with the children living with their parents for an extended period, we're going to
You're going to keep
very
that?
much try and keep that. Adds cost, but it's very much something we're going to try and keep.
Boy, that's something. He's taking the two most popular features of Obamacare and saying he's somehow going to finance those without having the larger pool of people being insured by Obamacare. That's the hardest thing in the world, to square that circle. Anyway, according to the Wall Street Journal, Mr. Trump, this is their quote, said a big reason for his shift from his call for an all-out repeal was that Thursday meeting at the White House with the president, who he said suggested areas of the Affordable Care Act to preserve. Here's Trump again. I told him I will look at his suggestions, and out of respect, I will do that, Mr. Trump said. Either Obamacare will be amended or repealed and replaced. Yeah, Mies, that's news. Amended is a word of conciliation, but I'll tell you, there is the squaring of the circle problem. And we went through this whole thing as they put together Obamacare. Yes, the middle class would like to have their kids being covered before the kids have jobs and a way to pay for even the responsibility they take upon themselves to insure themselves in their 20s, for example. Of course, people who have diabetes too or something like that, and they have something which is a pre-existing condition, would very much like to be insured. But if you only insure people who have serious health conditions and have extra kids as dependents, it's going to run out of money quickly. So you can't have one without the other. So I don't know where Trump's headed with this. Is he headed towards an acceptance of the large part of Obamacare?
It's really unclear what he's going to accept in Obamacare. I've talked to so many people, so many of his supporters over the last year who really, that was their driving force, was the fact that he was going to replace this with something completely new. So I think a lot of his supporters are now kind of wondering, well, what's he going to replace it with? And I think that he has a mandate really from his supporters to repeal Obamacare. He made that a very big part of his campaign. I think it's going to be really interesting if he then just starts to amend it and whether or not that's going to lead to a sort of revolt of the people who put him into office.
Well, the problem would be if he repealed it, all the people covered by now are out of insurance. Ron, I want to get back to you on this. This is a problem, and you can't, I mean, he wants to fix it. That takes a few months to figure out how to fix it. If you have a more conservative version of it, fine. But you can't just drop everybody from their insurance. They're going to die. I mean, you can't just do, that's probably a strong statement, but they're going to lose insurance. Let's put it that way.
Well, yes, and this has been a problem for forever with the Republicans and Obamacare. First of all, Obamacare is Romneycare, and Romneycare is a Republican plan. This is the Republican alternative to universal single-payer health care. So, yes, there are these features of Obamacare that everybody loves. Nobody likes the fact that if they're sick, they can't get health insurance. So you're going to tell the insurance companies that, I'm sorry, if somebody comes to you and wants to buy a policy, you have to allow them to buy a policy, and you can't charge them more for that policy just because they have an illness. But that will not work, period, unless you mandate that everybody buys insurance. I mean, that's just a fact.
Ron, I like the gray part of your hair up front there. You're getting to be a very mature gentleman here up there. Have you noticed that up there? I've noticed that you're going to look like me.
I'm following Hugh.
Hugh looks great. Hugh, let me ask you this about, I was impressed today that the guy from Jersey got dumped again. Third loss of the year. Didn't get the elected president, didn't get the elected vice president, and now getting dumped from the transition boss. This was a hell of a decision. Who made that? Kushner? Who in the Trump organization said, no more Jersey governor? This guy's got too much baggage. We're going to bring in Mike Pence and make him head of transition. Who did that?
Well, President-elect Trump yesterday spent part of his day with the Speaker of the House, the Constitutional Officer Paul Ryan, and with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who's very effective, and I wouldn't be surprised if they both whispered to him, we like to work with Mike Pence a lot. We get along very well with him. If we want to get off to a fast start, why don't you kind of ask him how to staff up? Because a lot of the names on this list that are floating around are establishment names. That means people who have good conservative reformist ideas, but also know, as you do, Chris, and as everybody knows, Washington is a unique place to do business in. Better to have someone who's been there for a long time like Mike Pence. And Chris Christie hadn't been dumped. He's been made vice chair. He's still around. It's a big circle, but Mike Pence is going to be the big player here, as Joe Biden was for President Obama.
Yeah. Well, it was a good bet that Mike Pence made on this guy. He bet on the horse, and the horse won. Ron, I love the way you think about this. Thank you. It's great to have your perspective and friendship. Thank you so much. Jimmy, it's more time for you next time. I got these two other guys. They sort of get all the ideas tonight from me. Anyway, you're the best. I love the New York Times now. I hope it's getting over its efforts to prevent us from having Trump because they didn't work.